The old woman stood frozen outside the bakery, staring at a loaf of bread through the glass as if it were something she could no longer afford. Her hands trembled inside the sleeves of her worn-out coat, and every few seconds, she looked down at the few coins in her palm. Then she quietly turned away. But she didn't know that a kind janitor named Daniel had been watching her from across the room. And she certainly didn't know that the simple act of kindness he was about to show her would change both of their lives forever. If you believe that kindness can give someone hope, that people deserve second chances, and that one small good deed can change a life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Humanity Tales for more heart-touching stories. Daniel had worked as a janitor at the Grand Meridian Hotel for almost 6 years. He wasn't the kind of man people noticed. He wore the same faded blue uniform every day, pushed the same cleaning cart through the endless hallways, and quietly cleaned up after people who rarely looked at him twice. But Daniel had learned not to measure his worth by how others treated him. Life had taught him humility early. He was raising his 10-year-old daughter, Emma, alone after losing his wife to an illness several years earlier. Since then, every dollar had a purpose. Rent. Electricity. Emma's school books. Medicine when she got sick. Groceries. There was never much left over. That afternoon, Daniel had only enough money in his wallet to buy a loaf of bread and some milk for Emma's breakfast the next morning. He was standing near the hotel bakery when he noticed the old woman outside. She looked tired. Her gray hair was messy, her coat was worn, and her shoes were badly damaged. She entered the bakery slowly and picked up a loaf of fresh bread. She looked at the price, checked the coins in her hand, and then quietly put it back. Daniel saw everything. The woman walked toward the door, trying to leave before anyone noticed her embarrassment. Daniel glanced at the bread he had planned to buy for Emma. Then he looked at the woman. For a moment, he hesitated. He needed that money too. But something inside him whispered that perhaps someone else needed it more. Daniel walked to the counter, bought the loaf of bread, and hurried outside. He approached the woman carefully and held the bag toward her. She stared at him with confusion. Daniel simply smiled and told her that someone had already paid for it. The woman looked at the bread, then at Daniel. Her eyes slowly filled with tears. She thanked him and walked away. Daniel returned inside and bought nothing for himself. He knew Emma would be hungry the next morning, but he also knew he had done something he could never regret. That evening, Daniel went home and told Emma that he would make breakfast from whatever they had left in the kitchen. Emma listened quietly, then hugged her father. She didn't complain. She only told him that she was proud of him. The next morning, something strange happened at the hotel. A convoy of expensive black cars stopped outside the entrance. Employees gathered near the lobby windows, wondering who had arrived. Moments later, the hotel's general manager rushed toward the entrance with several executives behind him. Then Daniel saw her. The old woman from the bakery walked through the doors. But she was no longer wearing the worn-out coat. She was dressed in an elegant black suit, surrounded by assistants and security guards. Everyone suddenly stood straight. The general manager looked terrified. The woman walked directly toward the reception desk and asked for Daniel. Nobody understood why. Daniel came out of the service hallway, still wearing his janitor uniform. When the woman saw him, her expression softened. She told everyone that Daniel was the man who had bought her bread the previous day. The room went silent. Then came the shocking truth. Her name was Margaret Wilson, the founder and CEO of Wilson Global Holdings, one of the largest private companies in the country. She was worth billions of dollars. But Daniel didn't know any of that. Margaret explained that she had been testing something. She had spent years watching how people treated the poor, the elderly, and those they believed had no power. That morning, she had intentionally dressed like a homeless woman and walked into places where nobody knew who she was. Most people ignored her. Some looked at her with disgust. But Daniel had noticed her. And he had helped her when he couldn't afford to help himself. Margaret then revealed something even more heartbreaking. Her company had recently been preparing to shut down one of its smaller properties, which would have left dozens of hardworking employees without jobs. She had been searching for someone who reminded her why compassion still mattered. Daniel had unknowingly reminded her. But Margaret didn't simply hand Daniel a suitcase of money. Instead, she offered him something far more meaningful. She offered Daniel a stable management position within one of her companies, complete with a salary that would allow him to provide Emma with the future he had always dreamed of. Daniel stood there speechless. He thought about the loaf of bread. It had cost him only a few dollars. But that small sacrifice had opened a door he never imagined existed. Months later, Daniel was no longer working as a janitor. He was managing a community support program created by Margaret's foundation, helping struggling families find food, work, and temporary housing. And every Friday, Daniel personally visited the same bakery. He bought dozens of loaves of bread. Then he gave them away to people who needed them. One evening, Margaret visited the program unexpectedly. She watched Daniel hand a bag of groceries to a struggling father and his children. She smiled. Daniel noticed her and smiled back. Neither of them needed to say anything. They both understood the lesson. Sometimes, the greatest act of kindness isn't the one that costs the most money. Sometimes, it's the one that costs you something when you don't have much to give. Daniel had thought he was simply buying bread for an old woman. He never realized he was giving hope to someone who had almost forgotten what kindness looked like. And Margaret had thought she was testing humanity. Instead, she discovered it. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to Humanity Tales. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us that good people still exist. And before you leave, comment, "Kindness always wins," if you believe one small act of kindness can change someone's life. Because sometimes, you don't need to be rich to make a difference. You only need a good heart. And sometimes, the person you help today may be the very person who changes your tomorrow.